So good thoughts, yes, good thoughts are preferable to bad thoughts, but then go beyond thought also. Then negative thoughts will lessen in your life, even if you've been around for a long time, as more presence arises. Good thoughts can arise naturally, and a lot of your consciousness is no longer dependent on what thoughts you have. There's just more presence, and you appreciate life through presence rather than trying to convince yourself that you should appreciate life. You appreciate life directly. Gratefulness is another important thing. Gratitude is, of course, wonderful, very transformative. Gratitude implies a deep appreciation of what you are perceiving around you. Whether or not you have the thought in your mind that accompanies that says, thank you, it's secondary. And after a while, you don't need thank you anymore, but when you first practice gratitude, thankful can be helpful. When you say something beautiful, thank you for things that otherwise you wouldn't even acknowledge. Thank you for how the light reflects off this table. Thank you for this shiny clock. I know it's not real gold, but it shines beautifully. Thank you for this amazing substance that we call water. Got these little, tiny bubbles in it, and here it is. I can look at it, drink it, it's alive, it's an amazing thing. And you can appreciate it, it's filled with light, life-giving substance. Why not appreciate it? And whether or not you say thank you, it's up to you. Thank you is not the main. The main thing is the act of giving it attention. That again is perceiving it through presence. And then everything is something to be valued that's around you. So that's wonderful spiritual practice, and of course for a while it's a spiritual practice. Then it becomes second nature. That's how you live. So there is some association with certain thoughts, yes, expressing gratitude, but it's not the main thing. The thoughts are more like pointers towards that which is beyond thought. But in many people's lives, the beginning of spiritual practice and realization is that they suddenly realize how much they've been trapped in negative thinking over past years. And they suddenly wake up to their own thought processes, whereas before they were trapped in their own thought processes. That's the beginning of spiritual awakening. If you realize what kind of thought processes have been predominant in your life over the past few years, on every day, through which you interpret other people, the world, yourself, your life, and so on. And that's an amazing jump, because it implies suddenly awareness or presence has emerged. And suddenly you become aware of your thinking. That was my first breakthrough, spiritual breakthrough. It was not a real full awakening. It was a partial awakening that then kind of disappeared again, went underground for another 10 years or more. It happened to me when I was 16 or 17, and my mind was deeply negative in many ways, because I'd been unhappy as a child, parents in constant conflict, violent arguments, and even physical violence, and a great sense of insecurity, because violence could explode at any moment at home. And we had very little money, so everybody else had more than we did. They had cars, we didn't have a car. They had a television, we didn't even have a television. I didn't realize then how lucky I was. And then I went to live with my dad in Spain, and he had moved from Germany to Spain with his savings, and just as I arrived there, he was running out of money. And we were poor, almost third world, with not enough money even to buy a fridge in Spain in the hot weather. But we could afford a block of ice. They would deliver at weekends, so you could order, somebody would come, and there was we had a fridge, but it didn't have any ends in it, just a cabinet, but you could put a block of ice in there and it would last for a day or two. So once a week we had enough money to order a block of ice, so on a Saturday it would be put in there and then we could put some food in there. But still, by Sunday lunchtime it would have gone off in the summer heat. So I was still very negative. My mind was, bad things always happen to me, was one of the repetitive thoughts. And whenever something bad happens, and of course, bound to happen to me, it always does. Well, nothing good ever happens to me. And then the first shift came, I was 16 or 17. A lady who was living in Spain, a German lady, had to go back to Germany, and she said, can I leave a few books? I have too much, can't take all my books back with me. Can I leave these books with you? She left a few books with us. And of those books, maybe 15 books, 8 or 9 of those books were written by a spiritual author, very relatively unknown at that time and even now. But this author, I picked up a book, and for the first time I read that there is a link between what happens in your outer world and your thought processes, and that negative thinking creates further negative experiences, and that you can become free of. That was a huge revelation. My mouth dropped open, and I read more and more, and then at that time I had a typewriter. I would even type out the old-fashioned typewriter, of course. I would type out whole pages of the book and collect them. And I shifted my thinking from negative to much more positive. And then, only a year later, I was longing to get away from there, from my dad and his second marriage, which wasn't working either. I was longing to get out, and suddenly everything happened. I got offered, at that time, was a wonderful job, even though I had no qualifications, in London, England. And the most incredible thing, how the life shifted, it was through changing my thinking, through this author. But then, in England, I was fine for 2 or 3 years. Then the negative thoughts became less and less, and I became unhappy again. So it kind of disappeared, and then I had many years of depression and anxiety, and finally at 29, something different happened. It wasn't just positive thinking, it was the end of being identified with thinking. So, but the first little change happened there, and for many on the spiritual path, that is also the case. If anybody is interested in this writer, who writes in a kind of old-fashioned biblical style, a German writer, but his books have been translated, they're not widely available at all. He writes under the name of Bo Yin Ra. But that was his spiritual name. So I still have most of these books. I haven't looked at them in a while, but I still value them. So a kind of partial early awakening through that. And this applies to many people when they first realize what kind of thoughts they have been thinking or habitually think, and then shift comes. That's the period when you put little stickers and labels in your place to remind you of positive things, such as, I love myself. Eventually, you transcend loving yourself, but it can be a wonderful intermediate step between transcending yourself and hating yourself. So you go from I hate myself to I love myself to I am myself.